Begin today on Daf Chav Zayin, the Mishnah on the top of the Yomid. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Nishba levatel es a mitzvah. One takes an oath to refrain from doing a mitzvah. V'loi bittel, and he did not refrain. He fulfilled the mitzvah. Potter, he's potter of the carbon for not fulfilling a shvuah, because you can't take upon yourself a shvuah to break a mitzvah. It doesn't work. This is a case everyone agrees to. Now, another case, lekayim. Person takes upon himself a shvuah to fulfill a mitzvah, and v'loi kiyim, he didn't do the mitzvah. So potter, he's potter of the carbon for breaking the shvuah. Now, the Mishnah explains what the chiddush in this is. Shahaya b'din, it would have been logical to say shehei chayiv. Then in such a case, he should be chayiv a carbon. Kedivrei Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, like it's actually the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. And here the Mishnah quotes what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says about this. That Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira said, Ma imoreshos, if regarding something which is voluntary, she'enim mushbal of Mahar Sinai. So there is no oath that he accepted from Matan Torah at Har Sinai. Harei chayev olav. And if a person swears that he's going to do this action, and he doesn't, he's chayev to bring a carbon for this. So mitzvah, shu mushba Allah Mahar Sinai. So if when it comes to a mitzvah, and he already previously took upon himself with an oath that he will fulfill this at Har Sinai, and now he additionally takes an oath upon himself personally to do this action of the mitzvah, most definitely you would think that here this shvuah should be effective, and if he doesn't fulfill that mitzvah, besides not fulfilling the mitzvah, there's additionally a carbon that he should have to bring for breaking his oath that he took upon himself to do this mitzvah.
He has to do the mitzvah mitzvah chiyuv.
Correct.
Swearing doesn't help him.
It's an added chiyuv. Now that he would swear, it's an added obligation, and if he breaks it, now he would have to bring the carbon. That's what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says.
But what's the logic to bring in that you're swearing on something that you're mechayev to do anyway?
Correct. But afal pikein, with the shvuah, it adds another obligation. Amrullah.
Bring in a carbon for not doing a mitzvah?
No. If a person doesn't fulfill a mitzvah saseh, you don't bring any carbon. Amrullah. So on this, the Chachamim answered, like this logic is not true. It doesn't apply when a person makes a shvuah to fulfill a mitzvah. And the reason is because if you say that when a person makes a shvuah regarding something which is voluntary, and there that shvuah takes effect, the reason is shekein asaba lav kehein, because there it's possible for the person to make this shvuah both in the negative and in the positive. And this is learned from the pasuk, because the pasuk says in the example of a shvuah, lahara ilahetiv. Why does the pasuk spell out these two details? That it could either be for the negative or for the positive. What the pasuk is saying is a shvuah only takes effect if it's such a type of shvuah that you could make that shvuah for the positive or for the negative. For example, regarding eating, a person can make a shvuah: I will eat or I will not eat. That's the kind of shvuah regarding a voluntary thing that takes effect. However, if a person swears to fulfill a mitzvah, this is not a case where the negative and the positive would apply. Because if a person would swear to refrain from doing a mitzvah, and he did not refrain, there everybody agrees that he will be potter. As the Gemara will bring the source soon over here for this. So since this is a kind of shvuah, if you swear to do a mitzvah, you can't make that same shvuah in the negative not to do the mitzvah. So therefore, even for the positive to do the mitzvah, it does not take effect. Tana Rabbanon, so on a Braisa we learned, and here the Braisa brings the source in the pasuk for this concept. Yochel, I would think, nishba levatel es a mitzvah. When one swears to refrain from doing a mitzvah, v'loi bittel, and he did not refrain. Yehei chayev, that he would be chayev, besides the mitzvah that he now did not fulfill, he should be chayev to bring a carbon for breaking his shvuah. Talmud Loimar, so the pasuk says, lahara oy lehetiv. It uses the two examples, when one makes a shvuah for something negative or something positive. And I compare the two. Ma hatove rishos, just like when it says in the pasuk that the shvuah is for the positive, this refers to something voluntary. How do we know? How do we know it refers to something voluntary? The Gemara will soon explain. So too, when it says here that he's making a shvuah for the negative, not to do, it doesn't mean that he says not to do a mitzvah. No, it's only regarding something voluntary. So oitzi nishba levatel is a mitzvah v'loi bittel shu potter. So from here I learned that I exclude a case of a person that swore to refrain from doing a mitzvah and he did not refrain, that he's potter from a carbon. Now the Braisa goes on to say, Yochel, I would think, nishba lekayim is a mitzvah, in a case where a person swears to fulfill a mitzvah, v'loi kiyam, and he did not fulfill the mitzvah. Sheyehi chayev. So I would think that in such a case, the person would be chayev for not fulfilling his shvuah, a carbon. Talmud loymar. So here the Brisa learns out from the same pasuk, and it actually says it in the opposite. I learned from the pasuk, it says lahora oy lehetiv, the two examples of a shvuah for the negative or shvuah for the positive. And what do I learn out from here? Ma hara rishos. Here the Brisa says the exact opposite point. I know that when it says hara, a shvuah for the negative, that it's referring to something voluntary. Again, the question is, how do we know? A moment ago the Brisa says that I know that when it says hatova in the positive, that's voluntary. And I compare hara to hatova. And here it's saying the exact opposite. That when a pasuk says lahara, I know that the term hara in pasuk means for something voluntary. Af hatove rishos. So too when it says that the shvuah is for something positive, it's also for something voluntary. So again, this comparison the Gemara will attempt to explain soon. So from here I learn out oitzi nishba lekayim is a mitzvah v'leikiyim shu pater. From here I learn to exclude that a case of a person that swears to fulfill a mitzvah and he did not fulfill, that he will be potter. Okay, now the Brisa goes on to explain other points that you learn from this pasuk. Yachol, I would think, if a person swears to do something which is bad for him, to hurt himself or something, and he did not do this, he did not fulfill this shvuah, I would think that he would be potter. Talmud loymar. So therefore, the pasuk clearly says lahara oy lehetiv, that if a person swears to do something that's bad for himself or good, that he'll be chayiv if he doesn't keep the shvuah. Ma hatove rishus, and when it says the term hatove, it means that a person is going to do something good that refers to something voluntary. Af hara rishus. So too, if a person is going to hurt himself in any way or do something bad for himself regarding anything voluntary, that he'll be chayiv. Now, ovi. So I learn out from here nishba lahara la'atzmoi. When a person swears to do something that's bad for himself and he did not keep that shvuah, did not do what's bad for him, sharishus biyadai, and this is something which is voluntary, it's in his hands, that will be chayiv. Now yachol nishba lahara la'acherim v'loy heira sheyeh chayiv. I would think take that a step further. When it says in the Torah lahara, it doesn't only mean lahara to himself, but maybe it also means if a person swears that he's going to hurt someone else and he did not, so he should be chayiv for that as well. Talmud loyma lahara oy lehetiv. So again, I learn out from what it says lahara oy lehetiv that ma hatove rishus. When it says hatove, it refers to something which is in your hands. It's voluntary. Af hara rishus. So too, when it says the term hara, to do bad, it means something which you have the right to do. So therefore, oitzi nishpa lahara la'acherim v'lo heira. That excludes a case where a person swears to do bad, to hurt someone else, and he did not do that. Because this is not in your hands. You're not allowed to hurt someone else, and therefore this kind of a shvuah does not take effect. You don't have to fulfill this shvuah. Okay. Then the last point, the Brisa says, "Binayin lerabais hatovas acher." And so we just said that when that makes a shvuah to hurt someone else, that kind of a shvuah does not take effect. How about the opposite? If one makes a shvuah to do a favor for someone else, does that shvuah take effect? You would think maybe to compare that if you make a shvuah to do for someone else, even for the good, it also doesn't take effect. It says the Brisa Talmud loyma oy lehetiv. It says the extra word of oy lehetiv would mean to do good, to do something good for yourself. For example, you say I will eat, or sorry, it says here oy, which means or. It's an extra word. And therefore that word is coming to say that even if you say a shvuah to do good for someone else, to do a favor for someone else, one has to fulfill that shvuah. Now here the Brisa just clarifies the point that it said before, ve'ezu hi haras acherim. What is considered to be a shvuah that you say that you'll do bad for someone else, that shvuah is not in your hands, it's not something you're allowed to do, so it doesn't take effect. If a person says, akes ploini, I will hit so-and-so, or ve'eftzas moichai, I will crush his brains, that's a shvuah that will not take effect. Okay. Atkan, the lashon of the Brisa. Now the Gemara will discuss what it said in the beginning of the Brisa. That when it says the two terms in the Torah, lahara and lahetiv, that we compare, on one hand the Brisa said that I know that lahetiv means rishos, and I compare lahara to also be rishos. On the other hand, the Brisa says the opposite. I know that lahara means rishos, and therefore lahetiv will also be rishos. So the Gemara asks, what is the Brisa saying? How do I know that, and how do I compare them? Umimai dekroi b'dvar rishus ksivi. How do I know that the pasuk, when it says lahara and lahetiv, that it's speaking about something voluntary? Dilme bedvar mitzvah ksivi. Maybe the pasuk is speaking about lahara, lehetiv, something negative, something positive, all in relation to a mitzvah. Says the Gemara, lo yisal kadaitach. No, you can't say that. It can't be that speaking about a mitzvah. Why not? Okay, so here the words of the Gemara are pretty bekitzer. Rashi explains what the Gemara means, but in the words of the Gemara, it's a little bit hard to understand what it's saying. So the point that the Gemara is going to say over here is, to understand what the Gemara means, 2 points. Number one, the Gemara says when it says lahara lehetiv, because it says it both together, even though lahara and lehetiv are opposites, but you have to compare them. Lahara and lehetiv have to be regarding something that's similar. That's number one. Number two, when it says lahara and lehetiv, to do bad or to do good. To do bad and to do good in what sense? So the Gemara here is basing this idea on that lahara lehetiv means what's bad for both the guf and for the nefesh, for the body and for the soul. That's what's called bad. And lehetiv also means what's good for the body and for the soul. That's the basis of what the Gemara says here. Okay, so let's see. So why leisal kedaitach? Why can't you say that it's talking about a mitzvah? Because the be'inon hatove dum yudahara. When it says in the Torah the term of hatove that it's good, it has to be something which is good that's similar to hara, which the Torah says here. And also on the other hand, v'hara dum yudah. And then when it says the term hara that it's something bad, there has to be a similarity, that what's bad is similar to what it says regarding hatove. And therefore it comes out as follows. It's not going to be able to be talking about a mitzvah. Because regarding a mitzvah, if you compare them, then the pasuk will not make sense. So now, if you're going to want to compare and say that the term of hara, that it's bad, should be similar to when it says that it's good, so if so, ma hatove eina bebitl mitzvah. So even if you want to say that the pasuk of hatove is talking about a mitzvah, right, so the Gemara is going to try to take. Let's try to take this approach. Let's say you want to say that hatava means a mitzvah. So what means hatava? What's good? Good doesn't mean to be mevatla mitzvah. For example, if a person would make a shvuah that he's going to eat chametz on Pesach or he's going to eat on Yom Kippur, so it's something good for the body, but it's not something that's good for the neshama. Okay, so therefore that can't mean what hatava means. So what does hatava mean? Hatava means, regarding a mitzvah, that a person makes a shvuah that he's going to eat matzah on Pesach. So that eating matzah on Pesach, that's something that's good for both, for the guf and for the neshama, the body and for the soul. So that's what hatava would mean. Real hatava means good for both, for the body and for the soul. So that's not bebitl mitzvah, it's to do a mitzvah. So now af hara, if so, when it says hara, and we want to compare and say that hara, even though hara means the opposite, not. Hatava means yes, and hara means not, but not regarding what? Not also, eina bebitl mitzvah. Hara does not mean regarding something which would be mevatla mitzvah. So if hara means not, the person says, I'm not going to eat. What would that mean? I'm not going to eat matzah? That's what hara would mean. If he's making a shvuah not to eat matzah, that means that it's something which is bad for the, it's bad for the guf, and but it's also being mevatla mitzvah. It can't be mevatla mitzvah. If hatove is regarding a case which is not mevatla mitzvah, and we're comparing hara to hatove, it also has to be at least compared in this sense that it's not to be mevatla mitzvah. But if that's the case, so then what is the hara? The hara would be, again, not to eat chametz. Oh, so hara would be also regarding a mitzvah, but it can't be regarding being mevatla mitzvah, to not eat matzah, so it would have to be not what? Not to eat chametz, exactly. But then the Gemara says, if that's the case, hara gufa hatavi, a shvuah not to eat chametz, that's actually good for the person. Not to eat chametz on Pesach is a hatava. It wouldn't be necessary for the Torah to specify hara and hatava, because not to eat chametz on Pesach is also good for the person. So basically the point that the Gemara is saying is that if you want to, on one hand, compare the hara to hatava, because they say together, but at the same time try to explain why it's still necessary for the Torah to write hatava separately and hara separately, if we're talking about in the framework of a mitzvah, that doesn't work. Because the moment you say that they have to be similar, it comes out that the shvuah of the hara will also be regarding something which is only good for the person, not to eat chametz and Pesach, so that's already included in hatava. So therefore the Gemara here is saying, this is all if you say that it's in relation to a mitzvah. But if you're going to say that hara and hatava is not in relation to a mitzvah, so then you could say that hara and hatava are both similar, but they're not going to be the same. And therefore the Torah has to write both of them. Okay, the Gemara is soon going to explain more regarding the Rishus. Now, va'akish, the same thing is also the other way around. Va'akish atava lahara, if you would want to compare the term of atava in the Torah to the term hara in the Torah, so then I'll say, now what does hara truly mean? Does hara mean something which is only bad for the body, not to eat? No, it's something which is bad for the body and for the soul. So what does hara mean? If you want to say it in the framework of a mitzvah, so ma hara eina b'kiyah mitzvah. When it says in the Torah the term hara within the framework of a mitzvah, that would not mean that a person says something which is bad just for the guf, but he's actually doing something good for his neshama by fulfilling a mitzvah. So for example, if a person would swear and say, I'm not going to eat chometz on Pesach, is that good for him or bad for him? It's bad for the guf, because he's not eating, but it's not bad for the neshama, because it's Pesach, and he doesn't want to eat chometz. So when it says in the Torah hara, what does hara mean? Hara doesn't mean regarding a mitzvah. Hara would mean a person that makes a shvur that he's not going to eat matzah on Pesach. So if a shvur not to eat matzah on Pesach, that's good for that's bad. That's bad for both. It's bad for the guf, he's not eating, and it's bad for the neshama, he's not eating matzah on Pesach. Now, if so, afatove einoi b'kiyah mitzvah. So now, when a person says a shvur for the yes, for the positive, it also, if you want to compare it to hara, it can't be regarding fulfilling a mitzvah. But if that's the case, so what is the shvur regarding the hatove? Regarding the hatov, it's going to have to be a kind of a shvuah where a person is breaking a mitzvah, where a person says he's going to eat chametz and Pesach. So that's a shvuah for yes, that he is going to eat. But what? To eat chametz and Pesach, and therefore it's compared to hara, because they're both being mevatel a mitzvah. But the question is, if so, hatov gufa harahi. But then it's not necessary for the Torah to write hatov separately, because then hatov should be included in hara. Because making a shvuah that he's going to eat chametz and Pesach, that's bad for him. So why wouldn't that be included in hara? So therefore, the Torah, only way to explain why the Torah writes hara separately and hatava separately is not in the framework of a mitzvah. It has to be only regarding something which is voluntary. Okay, but now the Gemara actually explains that this entire calculation that the Gemara made here does not hold water. It doesn't work out. Even if you want to say that it's talking about hatava, hara, good or bad regarding something voluntary, you could have the same question. That if you're trying to compare them and still understand why the Torah writes each one separately, it doesn't work. Why not? Because ihachi, the Gemara says, if so, b'dvar harishos, even regarding something voluntary, it's not gonna work out. You can't explain why the Torah has to write hara and hatava separately if you're saying that they have to be compared to each other. If they have to be compared to each other, so then why would the Torah write both of them separately? So what does the Gemara mean to say here? So Rashi here points out that the exact same cheshbon that the Gemara made here regarding a mitzvah, that true goodness is something which is good for the guf and for the nefesh. And then you can't explain how the hara and the hatava will have to be written separately. You could also say, even if it's talking about something voluntary, even if you're just talking about the body, not getting a mitzvah involved, we're not talking about the neshama, we're just talking about the body. But even there, when a person is speaking about something voluntary to eat, there's also two categories, even just regarding the body. You could swear about something that you're going to eat which is healthy for you, or you could swear about something that you're going to eat which is not healthy for you, which is harmful for the person. So over here as well, it's the exact same question. When the Torah says the term hatava, what does hatava mean? That a person says he is going to eat. What does that mean? What's true hatava? That he's going to eat something which is not healthy for him? If he's going to eat something which is not healthy for him, it may temporarily feel good, but it's not really good for the person because it's not healthy for him. So when the Torah says hatava, it means that he's going to eat, and he's going to eat something which is healthy for him. So if that's the case, when it says hara, not, that I'm not going to eat, it has to be similar to hatava. It has to be similar, meaning it's something which is healthy for him. So if when a person says he's not going to eat, what's a kind of a shvuah not to eat which is healthy for him? I'm not going to eat things that are not good for me. That's similar to hatava. If a person makes a shvuah, I'm not going to eat things that are healthy for me, so then it's not similar to hatava. So hara means I'm not going to eat things that are not healthy for me. But if that's the case, then why would the Torah have to write hara separately? Since it's not to eat something which is not healthy, that itself is good. So it's already included in hatava. So you come to the same point. If you want to compare hatava and hara to each other, it's going to end up coming out that hara is hatava, and therefore it's not necessary for the Torah to write both of them. And the same thing also in reverse regarding comparing hatava to hara. as Rashi explains over here. So therefore, the Gemara actually goes away from this pshat, even though it seems to be what the words of the Braisa before were saying, that we compare the hara to hatove, but the Gemara says, what does the Braisa mean? If you compare them to each other, it doesn't bring you to the conclusion that the pasuk has to be talking about something voluntary and not a mitzvah. So Ella, therefore the Gemara says another pshat. That how do I know that the pasuk is talking about a reshus, something voluntary and not a mitzvah? The reason is because of this drasha that the Braisa mentioned, that there's the word oi, that extra word, which is l'rabai satova sacherim. That's coming to add and say that the shvuah takes effect even if a person is making a shvuah to do a favor for someone else, not just something good for yourself, but even for someone else. So the fact that you need this drasha, this extra word of oi, that proves that the pasuk is specifically talking about a reshus. It must be that the pasuk is talking about something voluntary. Why? Because the if you're going to say that the pasuk is speaking about Shevuos that are done in the framework of a mitzvah, so if you're saying that when it's to do something bad for someone else, that's included in the pasuk because it's speaking all within a mitzvah. Which would mean that when the Torah says lahara, it means lahara what? Not just lahara for the body, but lahara for the neshama, for a mitzvah. Meaning lahara la'acherim, that it's an aveda. A person may not do something bad for someone else, but the pasuk is speaking in the framework of a mitzvah, and therefore the pasuk is saying regarding a mitzvah that if you want to break a mitzvah by doing bad to someone else, that the shvuah will take effect. That's what lahara la'acherim would mean in the framework of a mitzvah. If so, hatava sacherim yibaya. Would it be necessary to have the word oi to say that when a person is going to do a favor, which means a mitzvah for someone else, do I need a special oi to say that this is included? That's the source. So because you need a special word oi to say that a shvuah to do good for someone else is included, that proves that the pasuk without that is not talking about a mitzvah. Because if it's talking within the framework of a mitzvah, then I would automatically know that that includes hara sacherim, because hara sacherim is in the framework of a mitzvah, to break a mitzvah actually, to do bad for someone else. And then I would automatically know that in the positive, to do a favor for someone else is included. So if you need a special word oi to be marbe, to do a favor for someone else, that means the pasuk itself, when it says lahara lehetiv, is speaking about voluntary things. And then it's coming and adding to do a favor for another yid, which is a mitzvah, that's included as well. So therefore, the oi is what proves that before the oi, it's talking about something voluntary. Now, how this fits into the lashon of the Braisa before, I don't know, because the Braisa said something else, but this is the conclusion of the Gemara here, according to one shot. Let's see. So now the Gemara goes on to say, is this word oi really extra? V'hai oi, this word oi here, don't we need the word oi to just make a distinction? That the shvuah could be either lahara or lahetiv. If not for the word oi, I would say maybe one is only chayiv if he makes a shvuah of both, lahara and lahetiv. Says the Gemara, no, l'chalik lo yitzarech kra. I don't need that word oi to make that distinction. It's self-understood that lahara, even if it would not say oi, even if it would say lahara ulahetiv, I would know that it's separate. Says the Gemara, that's true according to Rabbi Yonasan, that if it would say a vav, u, even without the oi, I would know that it's separate. El Rabbi Yeshia, but according to Rabbi Yeshia, that holds that you do need the word oi to separate. Ma'ikal meimar. So what are you going to say? The word oi is not extra. And the Gemara brings the source of their machlekes. Tanya, we learned in the Braisa when the pasuk says, "Isha sheyekal es aviv ve'es imoy," one that curses his father or his mother. Here it does not say oi; it says ve, curses a father and a mother. So the question is, does it mean only both? Ein li ela aviv ve'imoy. I would think that this means only one that curses a father and a mother. Aviv v'lo imoy, imoy v'lo aviv, one that curses a father and not, or a father not the mother, or a mother and not the father. Minayin. How do I know that the Isser applies as well? Talmud Loimar, the pasuk repeats a second time. In the end of the pasuk again, aviv v'imoy kilel. So it says again kilel, and here it says the word kilel near imoy. In the beginning of the pasuk it says yikalel near aviv. So therefore I know aviv kilel, that the Isser applies to one that curses just a father, and Imay Kilel, one that curses just a mother. Divrei Rabbi Yeshia, this is Rabbi Yeshia's opinion. So here you clearly see that Rabbi Yeshia holds, if it doesn't say oi, if it says ve, that would mean both together. However, Rabbi Yonasan says that's not, we don't need this drasha. Mash nem kechad, you think that maybe it means that the curse has to be both. and umash machat b'fnei atzmo, but maybe it means each one separately. So therefore, but what do I say about this? When the Torah says es ave ve'es ima, it actually means each one separately. How do I know? Because unless the Torah adds the word yachtav, I say that it means each one separately. And the source of this is because it says by the Eser of Kilayim, yachtav. There it says, do not plow with the ox and the donkey together. Only because it says the word yachtav, then it means together. But it just when it says a vav, between two words, it still means that they're both separate. And therefore, over here, in this pasuk, when it says lahara ulahetiv, the word oy is extra according to Rabbi Yonasan. If it would say lahara ulahetiv, I would still know that it means separate. So according to Rabbi Yonasan, the word oy is extra. But according to Rabbi Yeshia, the word oy is not extra here. So how do I know to darshan that word oy and then to say that this pasuk lahara ulahetiv or lahara ulahetiv is speaking about a dvar harishus? So the Gemara says, even according to Rabbi Yeshia, we have a source that this pasuk is speaking about a rishus. Why? Because because the source of Rabbi Yeshia for this is like what Rabbi Akiva darshaned on the previous daf, on daf Chavav. The Darish, Rabbi Akiva darshans riboy umiyute. Rabbi Akiva darshans a pasuk that there's a riboy and a miyot. So in the lashon of the pasuk where it speaks about the shvuah, there's a riboy, miyot, and riboy. It says kiseshava levata b'sfasayim. That's the riboy. Then it says lahara oy lahetiv, which is a miyot, specifically this. And then it says again lachol sheyavata, which is again a riboy. And the Gemara before in Daf Chavav said that what does Rabbi Akiva learn from this? That what's the exclusion in this pasuk coming to exclude? It's coming to exclude a shvuah for a mitzvah. That's where Rabbi Akiva darshan clearly that a mitzvah is not included in the shvuah to be chayav for it. So the Gemara explains, if you're going to say the pasuk is coming to say that what's voluntary is where the shvuah takes effect, so then memayit var mitzvah. So then the pasuk is excluding this case of a shvuah regarding a mitzvah. But if you're going to say that the pasuk includes even a shvuah for the sake of fulfilling a mitzvah, mimai kamamayit. So when it says lahara elahitiv, what is it that we are going to exclude from this? Okay, so the Rishonim say that the Gemara is saying that a shvuah for a dvar mitzvah is considered to be the case that's the most out of the ordinary. That's a shvuah that's not regarding any of the kinds of typical needs of a person at all. It's in a completely different category. It's regarding a mitzvah. So if even a dvar mitzvah, which is out of the ordinary, we're not going to be excluding, so then what else could you exclude? That's the only thing that's the furthest to exclude. And therefore, it must be that that's what the exclusion goes on, that we exclude a dvar mitzvah, and therefore we know that only for a dvar or rishus is where the shvuah takes effect and a person would be chayiv. That's the pshat in the Gemara here. Taisvis asks that there could be other things that you could exclude, but that's a simple pshat in the Gemara according to what it says in the Rishonim. Going back to the Mishnah, it said, Amar Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseire, Ma'amar Rishus Chulu. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseire holds that when one swears to fulfill a mitzvah, the shvuah actually does take effect. And he says, if a shvuah takes effect for something voluntary, for something that you're obligated to fulfill, it definitely takes effect. And the Rabbanan answer to that, no, it can't take effect, and I'll prove it to you, because every shvuah has to have the possibility to be in the negative and in the positive. If it's for a mitzvah, you can make the shvuah in the positive to do the mitzvah, but you can't make it in the negative to break the mitzvah. So such a shvuah can't take effect. So the Gemara explains, the Rabbanan are giving a very good response to what Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseire says. So what would Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseire say to this? Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseire, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseire will tell you. When it comes to a person that made a shvuah to do bad to someone. So lav afal gav de lesse b'chlal hara sacherim. So again, let me just repeat that again. When a person makes a shvuah to do something good for someone else, right? To do a favor for someone else. So that the shvuah takes effect. Even though lav afal gav de lesse b'chlal hara sacherim. This kind of a shvuah, you cannot make the shvuah for both lahara and lahetiv. You can't make a shvuah that is going to do bad for someone else, but yet if you make a shvuah to do good for someone else, it takes effect. So I could say similar regarding a mitzvah. Even though to make a shvuah to break a mitzvah it will not take effect, but the shvuah to fulfill a mitzvah, it still takes effect. So we have an example for this. V'Rabbi Rachmana, the Torah says it still takes effect. So hachanami b'kiyam mitzvah. So too by a mitzvah. Avagav delesa b'bitl mitzvah. When you make a shvuah, you cannot make a shvuah to break a mitzvah. Rabbi Rachmana. Nevertheless, the Torah says that you can make a shvuah to fulfill a mitzvah. But the Rabbanan disagree, and they say Hasam Isei Beloy Eitiv. Regarding a person that makes a shvuah to do a favor for someone else, even if you can't apply for that shvuah lahara and laheitiv, because you can't swear to do bad, harm to someone else, but over there's the hain and the lav. The person could make the shvuah to say, I will do a favor for someone else, or I will not do a favor to someone else. So the hain and the lav applies by that shvuah. Hacha mi isei beloy akayim. However, regarding a mitzvah, if a person would make a shvuah to fulfill a mitzvah, so over here, the hain and the lav, the yes and the no, are not possible. A person can't make a shvuah that I will not fulfill this mitzvah. And therefore, by a mitzvah, the Rabbanan say this kind of a shvuah to fulfill a mitzvah does not take effect. Person made a shvuah not to eat this piece of bread, or this loaf of bread. Then he says, shvuah shaloi eichlano. A second shvuah on the same loaf of bread, I will not eat it. A third shvuah shaloi eichlano, shvuah that I will not eat it. Va'achola, and he eats this bread, ein chayiv elo achas. He's only chayiv once, a carbon, for the first shvuah that he made. Now, the Mishnah concludes, zu hi shvuah's bitui. This is what's called Shevuos bitui. A person makes a shvuah and he utters with his mouth to do something and he doesn't fulfill it. Shechayavin al zadoina makis. If he deliberately does not fulfill his shvuah, then he gets malkis. Val shegagasa. If by mistake he didn't fulfill his shvuah, he's chayav a carbon oilev, the carbon which is for the rich and for the poor. Shvuas shav. Now there's another category of a shvuah. When a person makes a shvuah in vain, that's when a person swears regarding a stone that it's a piece of gold. Everybody knows that it's not true. Chayavin as daina makis. For that kind of a shvuah, a person is chayav malkis when it's bemezid, but val shegigasa potter. But b'sheigig, one is potter. There's no carbon for this. Sagt the Gemara, lama lila misni. Why does the Mishnah use the terms? The person here made 3 of the same shvuah regarding the same loaf of bread, but it actually switches the terminology. If you pay close attention, it doesn't say the same thing. So why does the Mishnah say shvuah shaloi oichel? The first shvuah he said is loy oichel. I will not eat this bread. Then he says shvuah shaloi eichlen no, a shvuah that I will not eat it. It's not exactly the same. Why is the Mishnah switching that terminology? So the Gemara explains because it doesn't actually mean the exact same thing. Hakamash mulam. This is what the Mishnah is telling you. Taimed the Omar. The reason why the second shvuah does not take effect is because first he said shaloi oichel. I will not eat the loaf of bread. And then Vahadar Amar Shaloi Echlen no. And then he said the second shvuah I will not eat it. Only in that case will the second shvuah not take effect. And the Gemara Delay Mechayev, so it won't be chayev. And the Gemara will explain in a moment why. Delay Mechayev El Chada. So he'll be chayev only once, and the second shvuah does not take effect. But if the person would have said it in the opposite order, first he would say a shvuah that he will not eat it. And then he adds and says, the shvuah that I will not eat from the loaf of bread, here mechayev tarti. Here, if he eats from the loaf of bread, he actually will be chayev twice. So what's the difference between these two terminologies? Oichel or oichlen no? So the Gemara explains, Kidder Rave, like what Rave said. The Amar Rave said, Shvuah shaloi oichel kikirzu. When a person says, a shvuah I will not eat this loaf of bread, kivin sha'achal mimena kezayis. If he ate even only a kezayis from this loaf of bread, chayev. The person will be chayev. Because oichel means I will not eat. I will not eat anything from this loaf of bread. So what's the amount, the smallest amount? According to the Rabbanan, it's a kazayis. So that's the term of oichel. Then when he says shaloi echlen no, when a person makes a shvuah, I will not eat it. What does that mean? That's a different kind of a shvuah. That means he's making a shvuah that I will not eat it fully. I will not eat the whole loaf of bread. So therefore we understand what the Gemara said before. If the person first made a shvuah that I will not eat it, which is a shvuah not to eat the whole loaf of bread, if he makes a second shvuah that I will not eat, which means I will not eat even a kazayas, he's adding to the first shvuah, so the second shvuah could take effect. But if you already made first a shvuah that I will not eat even a kazayas, and then he adds and says that I will not eat the entire loaf of bread, what is he adding? He's not adding anything. That's what the Mishnah is talking about. If he first said loy oichel, I will not eat even a kazayas, and then he said loy echlen, no, I will not eat the whole loaf of bread, he's not adding anything. So the second shvuah cannot take effect over the first shvuah. That's what the Mishnah was saying. Shevuos shaloach lena. Now, there's another thing in the Mishnah here. It said he actually made 3 Shevuos. He said Shevuos shaloach lena va'achala and echayev ala'achas chulu. So the question is, ha'asu lamali. Why is the Mishnah saying that the case here is he made 1 Shevuah, 2nd Shevuah, and a 3rd Shevuah? Don't we understand the halacha that a 2nd Shevuah does not take effect over a 1st Shevuah by 2? Why is it necessary to say that he made a 3rd Shevuah? So the Gemara says, Hakamash Malan, because it wants to tell you that there's another halacha to be learned out of here. It's teaching me chiyuva hudeleke, that when you make a 2nd or a 3rd Shevuah, the 2nd Shevuah will not obligate you for another carbon. But hashvuah ikke, that doesn't mean that the words that you said with the 2nd Shevuah, that it's completely dvarim b'teilim, that Shevuah doesn't exist. That Shevuah exists, but because the 1st Shevuah is in effect, the 2nd Shevuah has no place where to take effect. But the Shevuah is still in existence. And therefore, what happens is, the I mishkachas revacha, if there will be space for the 2nd Shevuah to take effect, chayla, it will take effect. What does this mean? Lamai hilchasa. What's the relevance of this? If anyways it can't take effect, what's the difference if you're saying that the 2nd Shevuah exists or it does not exist at all? So the Gemara explains, look at the Rave. The relevance for this would be like what Rave explained. Rave said, She'im nishal ala rishayna. What happens if a person made 2 Shevuos? So now he's not chayiv for the 2nd Shevuah. It has no place to take effect. But what if he went and now was shoyel? He undid the 1st Shevuah. When a person makes a Shevuah, he can go to a Chacham, which finds him a Pesach to have Charata from that Shevuah. And once you have Charata from that Shevuah, so now it removes that Shevuah retroactively, like he never made that Shevuah. So if Nishal al Rishayna, so now, also Leishniya Tachtel. Now there's a place for the 2nd Shevuah to take effect. So that's the point that the Mishnah was saying here. If I would say that when a person makes a 2nd Shevuah, once he already made the 1st Shevuah, that the 2nd Shevuah is dvarim b'teilim, it doesn't exist at all, so then even if he undoes the 1st Shevuah, the 2nd Shevuah is non-existent. So there would be no 2nd Shevuah here. But what the Mishnah is saying over here is, he made a 1 Shevuah, he made another Shevuah, and now even if he'll remove these 2 Shevuahs, there will be a place for the 3rd Shevuah now to take effect. Because the 3rd Shevuah exists, it just doesn't have where to take effect. Once you remove retroactively the first 2 Shevuos, now the 3rd Shevuah could take effect. That's why the Mishnah is saying this halacha to teach this case, to teach me this additional halacha. Says the Gemara, shall we say we have a proof for this point that Rava said? Because it says, Misha Nazar, or Misha Nadar, Beis Naziris. A person made a vow and he took upon himself 2 times to be a Nazir. What does that usually mean? Every Nazir, a Stam Naziris is 30 days. That means you have to be a Nazir for 30 days. Then you bring the Karbanis for the completion of that Naziris. And then you have to keep a 2nd Naziris for another 30 days. What happened? The Mana Rishayna, so he counted the 30 days for the first Naziros. For Hifrish Aleh Carbon, and he already separated a carbon for that first Naziros. But now, Ba'achakach Nishal Al Rishayna. But now he went and he undid the first Naziros, and that undoes it retroactively. So what happens now? Also, Leishniya Barishayna. So that first Naziris that he just counted 30 days will count for the 2nd Naziris. He doesn't have to keep a 2nd Naziris.
But he said that he brought a carbon instead of carbon.
He was mafresh a carbon. He did separate the carbon already, but with everything he did, the Naziris and the carbon will all count for the retroactively that's uprooted. So it'll all count for the 2nd Naziris. So what do we see over here? When a person makes the 2nd Naziris, the 2nd Naziris is here. And even though at this time it can't be used for the first 30 days, because the first 30 days has to go on the first Naziris, but the moment he removes the first Naziris retroactively, now the 2nd Naziris goes in that 30 days. So the same thing the Gemara is saying should apply by a Shevuah. When you make 1 Shevuah, you make a 2nd Shevuah. The 2nd Shevuah cannot take effect, but it's in existence. The moment you're going to remove the first Shevuah, retroactively, that allows for the 2nd Shevuah to take effect. That's the point that Rava said. But the Gemara says you can't compare these 2 points. Hachi hashta, there's no comparison, because Hasam Naziros Miya Isa. When a person takes upon himself to be a Nazir twice, so what happens? The 2nd Naziris is there. Because after he finishes counting the 30 days and keeping the first Naziris, he now has to keep the 2nd Naziris, even if he doesn't undo the first Naziris, he's going to have to keep the 2nd Naziris afterwards. So by Naziris, it's obvious, we can understand that the 2nd Naziris exists. It's just a question of timing. Could he do it in the first 30 days, or does he have to wait for the 2nd 30 days? So once he undoes the first Naziris, retroactively, so the first 30 days will count for the 2nd Naziris. But hacha, in our case, Shvuah Shniya, Mi Isa Klal. When a person takes upon himself 2 Shevuos, if he's not going to undo the first Shevuah, the second Shevuah has no existence at all, because it can't take effect anyway. He doesn't have to keep that second Shevuah in any other time. So if there's no way that he should fulfill it, as long as the first Shevuah is in effect, we could still say that even if when he undoes the first Shevuah, the second Shevuah is non-existent. It doesn't take effect at all. And therefore, there's no comparison to the case of Naziris. So it's not a raya to what Rava said.